Electricity, that mysterious cultural force which has shaped our civilization, illumined our dark cities, and driven our amazing inventions. Modern studies are beginning to show the health-damaging potential of this mystical current, yet since its discovery, many have sought relief from illness and pain through its application. Come with us to the borderlands of science, where we are examining just one facet of this search for an electrical panacea, a device known as the Lukovsky Multiple Wave Oscillator. Every living thing emits radiations. Life is the dynamic equilibrium of all cells, the harmony of multiple radiations which react upon one another. Disease is the oscillatory disequilibrium of cells, the struggle between microbic radiation and cellular radiation. Georges Lakhovsky was one of that rare breed of scientists who studies the subtle living energies of the cosmos. He discovered that all things emit radiations, and that the great majority of living beings can receive and detect subtle radiations. In order to understand the unseen world of subtle vibrations, he investigated a wide range of phenomena. The clockwork migrations of birds to their nesting grounds and fish to their streams is well known but not understood, and Lukovsky attributed this activity to a type of the finer senses. The profound effects of solar cycles on agriculture, animal reproduction rates, and human health were revealed. Lukovsky's researches showed that the nature of the soil modifies the field of cosmic rays impinging on the Earth, and that the morphology of beings depends greatly on the geological composition of their geographic area. This led to his discovery of the geographical distribution of cancer in relation to various soil types, such as is shown on this chart of Paris. The soil of low cancer areas consists generally of sand, limestone, gypsum, primitive rocks, and recent alluvial deposits rich in gravel and sand, that is, soils which allow the cosmic radiation to penetrate the earth. Soils such as plastic clays, marl, chalk, iron ores, carboniferous beds, and slate reflect the cosmic rays and create an interference pattern which upsets the dynamic equilibrium of the living cell. In essence, Lukovsky decided that cancer is a disruptive modification of the electrical constants of living cells, whose natural causes are due to variations in cosmic ray streams caused by reflective soils, subsurface water veins, and certain solar, lunar, and planetary relationships. Each living cell is an oscillating circuit. That is, it has pulses or cycles like a swinging pendulum. The cells have resonant wavelengths in the range of cosmic radiations. The human body has 200 quintillion cells, all vibrating at different frequencies. To drive out a cancerous condition, Lukovsky would create a field of the proper frequencies which would bring the cells back to oscillatory equilibrium. It is a well-known law of resonance that when one tuning fork is rung, an identical fork, when held nearby, will begin to ring also. Lukovsky did many experiments with oscillating circuits. The simplest of these were with single lengths of wire made into a single-turned spiral, suspended around the stems of growing plants. This picture shows geraniums 2 months after they were inoculated with cancer. The large plant has an oscillating circuit suspended around its stem on an ebonite insulator. The tumor can still be seen halfway up the stem. The untreated control plants have all perished. This second picture shows this plant flourishing without the tumor, having regained cellular equilibrium due to the oscillating circuit. Lukovsky recorded similar treatments done on animals with excellent results. These researches suggest that the use of properly tuned oscillating circuits on the human body can restore cellular equilibrium. Lukovsky's researches turned to radiobiology. He designed an oscillator generating multiple wavelengths from 10 centimeters to 400 meters, as well as harmonics thereof. In this electrical field, every cell could find its own frequency and vibrate in resonance. This unit, used successfully against cancer in the 1930s, consists of 2 concentric ring metallic antennae driven by electrical oscillations, the subject sitting between them. These antennae can be seen to be attached to the front of larger tubes and thence via wires to a power supply. This close-up of one antenna in action gives us clues to the unknown fabrication details of Lukovsky's units. The antennae consists of 12 copper tubes harmoniously scaled and suspended concentrically with silk thread. The spheres on the end of each tube provide capacitance, and it has been claimed are used to seal noble gases such as argon within the tube. The minute effluvae, or electrical brush discharge, at the top are on 2 protruding spheres which appear to be the mechanical pins for holding the outer ring, as well as the electrical connections for the antenna. The brush discharge off them shows the direction of the driving force. The effluvae off the lower portion of the outer ring indicates that this is an end-fire antenna, thus giving clues to the electrical circuit driving it. This effluvae is turned up for the photograph, but could not be seen during normal operation. Such high power could possibly give the subject radio frequency burns. Whatever the oscillating agency affecting the subject sitting between the 2 antennae is, it is a novel component at 90 degrees from the antenna plane. This detail of the outer ring shows the gap spheres, the protruding spheres, and the layout of the silk bracing wires. Suspension of the inner rings with silk wire would allow physical as well as the electrical oscillation. This schematic from Lukovsky's 1934 U.S. patent, apparatus with circuits oscillating under multiple wavelengths, shows a different antenna hookup than the electrotherapeutic devices pictured in his books. This is quite easy to understand, as the patent is for multiple wave oscillators in general, and it is written to cover infinite variations on the theme. In describing the antenna and hookups, the patent states, "These rings may be arranged either in the same plane or in different planes. These rings may be fed by any producing device whatever of high frequency. One of several points of this high-frequency circuit is or are connected to the end of one or several of the rings forming the radiating apparatus." We can see Lukovsky hid his construction details well. However, many researchers have used this patent as a basis for building equipment to test the concept of restoring cellular equilibrium. A modern-day researcher named Eric Dollard, author of various texts on high-frequency electrical researches, has done some serious investigation towards discovering the correct circuit layout of the original equipment. He suggests that the power supply is a high-voltage transformer, and the tubes holding the antennae contain capacitors and quench spark gaps hidden from view. This circuit excites the outer ring of the antenna, and the inner rings act as secondaries of various sizes, producing a wide range of frequencies. Here is an extension of this circuit, providing the wiring layout for 2 antennae. This circuit would not have to be high power, as Lukovsky stated that he cured cancer with 10 to 12 watts, and of course also with no power in his oscillating rings. Scaling the antenna in logarithmic proportions provides a field of frequencies and harmonics acting in concert. This multi-wave oscillator antenna was designed using the square root of the golden ratio, and it was discovered that without any electrical stimulation, it propagates a field beneficial to plant life. Lifelike golden ratio electric discharges have been photographed around experimental high-frequency apparatus, and a golden ratioed plant-like pattern has been burned into this block of wood with a Tesla coil. This is an experimental setup following Eric Dollard's MWO suggestions. What we have here is an old medical coil from 1919. It has low frequency, high frequency, and mid-range frequency called the D'Arsonval currents. And what we're using for ease of setup here is the mid-frequency. The antenna can be excited with high frequency or low frequency. And so the mid-frequency feeds into this little arrangement here, which is 2 high voltage capacitors with a spark gap crossing them, as in the schematic. Now this is what was in the tube in Lukovsky's original. So the force came out, and these screws holding the capacitors in would represent those protruding spheres. And of course, this printed circuit antenna represents the hanging tube antenna of Lukovsky. And to simulate the ball capacitance, these antennas have reverse strips to cover the gaps. I'm going to turn this on just to show you it sparking. It has a spark gap adjustment here to provide the oscillations. And this spark gap here, now these would all be contained in Lukovsky's original, so you wouldn't see any sparking during operation. And you will notice that there will be no brush discharge off of this. It's not high enough power to provide that. And what you're looking for in units like this is not really high power, but quality of power. Lukovsky received a second patent in 1944, tube for producing multiple wavelengths. This is again a general patent, but mentions industrial and medical fields. This illustration from that patent shows a bulb containing either a vacuum or low-pressure noble gases, and a similar antenna hookup to his first patent. This lends credence to the suggestion that the original units had noble gases inside the tubes, as this bulb would provide an easier method of manufacturing a device to produce the same effect. This bulb shows a single wire circuit exciting the top conical coil, which would excite the secondaries of various proportional lengths. This gives more clues to Lukovsky's secret, and the patent is worded to cover log periodic scaling of antennae, such as in the golden ratio units. In 1891, Oskar Korschelt received German patent number 69340 for an ether radiating apparatus, whose intent was to accumulate living etheric forces from the cosmos and direct them for therapeutic purposes. This unit consisted of 2 opposing spiral antennae, manufactured from wire or chain, and connected through the center. The antenna could be electrified to produce increased power. This drawing shows an antenna similar to the Korschelt device, but produced a full century after. It is physically vibrated and can also be electrified to produce increased power. The antenna diagram you just saw for the spiral wire antenna is embodied in this unit here built by Lou Shad. First of all, we have a PVC stand which swivels, and here we see the antenna which was pictured in the diagram. It's horizontal to the ground, made out of double twists of bare copper wire, and that just hangs free here, coming down on a single wire. Below that there's a smaller spiral, and then there's a little antenna coming up like this to pick up vibrations. Now, there's variations on this, but the main part of it is this flat antenna here. And there's two coils here which are identical, and through these 12 volts DC can be applied to the antenna to provide electrification. This aquarium pump serves no other purpose but to physically vibrate the apparatus, which provides the oscillations of the antenna. Now, pulsed 12 volt DC can be fed in through these two small coils, but that's really not necessary for operation. When this physically vibrates, you can actually feel sometimes a cool wind blowing off like an ion wind. And that's what's really amazed me about this unit, that with no power you actually get the strongest effect I've ever felt. This diagram shows an oscillator using a half-wave coil connected to two solid metal plates. Nikola Tesla gave a paper on the use of this type of oscillator for electrotherapeutic purposes in 1898. He states, "In my first experiments, I used two metal plates as shown, but later I found it preferable to replace them by two large hollow spheres of brass covered with wax of a thickness of about 2 inches. In this manner, the unpleasant shocks to which the experimenter was exposed when using the plates were prevented." In 1963, Borderland Sciences Research Foundation published a schematic from Bob Beck which was claimed as an adaptation of Lukovsky's first patent. The MWO maintained a constant interest, and this MWO handbook was published a quarter of a century later with the current BSRF research file, including many of the diagrams shown in this video. Beck's basic unit consists of a quarter-wave high-frequency coil. This diagram shows a basic oscillating circuit driving such a coil. Two concentric ring antennae, somewhat at variance from Lukovsky's, are connected to this unit with a single wire to each as in Tesla's diagram, one from the high-frequency terminal and the other from ground. This wire is usually connected to the second ring as in a Yagi TV antenna, but can also be connected to the center. This is a Bob Beck multiple wave oscillator, and what we have here is a basic oscillating circuit comprising of a spark gap capacitors, one small tube, and a Model T coil. And that circuit drives this small quarter wave Tesla coil here, which pushes the high frequency out the end, upon which there is an antenna hookup. Now, the antenna we're using in this one was made by Riley Crabb by taking a piece of plexiglass, spraying it with adhesive, and laying a sheet of aluminum foil on it. And then using a special jig he made, he would cut out the rings. And as you can see on here, this ring here is slightly larger than this one. So it's the excited ring. This gives off a pretty good shock. Now the antenna can also be driven from the center. So we'll use a golden ratio antenna, which has been drilled in the center. Get a little action there. Here we have an interesting Beck-style multi-wave oscillator. This one has a quarter wave coil in it, which drives the main antenna here. And coming off the ground end of the antenna, we have a resonator antenna. And now the subject would sit in between these two facing each other and put their feet on the ground plate here. And this also has a well inside the coil on the end, which people would place things like homeopathic medications and vitamins in to try to broadcast them through this unit. We'll turn it on and see how the antennas look. Again, we see the arc between the rings, mostly off the driven element, but it does come in. And on the resonator antenna, you don't get any arcing, but if you touch it, you will get a mild shock. This multiple wave oscillator also has a little argon bulb attachment for application of electricity directly to the body. We'll turn this on. The argon bulb principle was utilized in these units known as violet ray massagers. This one was made by the Renew Life company in 1922, and it has a high frequency coil driving this small bulb here. Many cures were claimed for these units, but would you bet your life on it? This unit is a variation on the gas bulb theme, has a high frequency coil driving these gas tubes, and is alternating argon and neon in them. And this unit is used to stimulate circulation in the feet. Get a mild tingling and smell a lot of ozone. This multi-wave oscillator was built by Mike Brown of Pleasant Hope, Missouri, and it has a quarter wave coil with a single high voltage terminal feeding into the antenna, and it has a fan inside for cooling the circuit. Blows out here. There's no visible arcing on the antenna, so if we bring a screwdriver nearby we can see that it is still quite energized. This unit also has an argon bulb attachment. We can see that the bulb reacts much more to the coil in this unit than the antenna does. This multi-wave oscillator is made by Clark Kent of Super Science in Dayton, Ohio, and it consists of a quarter wave coil driving the antenna, and it has a resonator antenna coming off the ground of the coil. This also has a timer circuit on it to go along with the spark gap for adjusting frequencies. Switch antennas here. Here is an antenna called the corona discharge antenna. And here is the golden ratio antenna that Clark supplies with his units. This unit also has an argon bulb attachment. Trevor James Constable, author of The Cosmic Pulse of Life, had the following to say in regards to the Beck-style MWOs. The MWO I regard as a false path. The cellular stimulation theories sound and seem good because they are mechanistic, and therefore sympathetic with the mechanistic Weltanschauung. In between the MWO antennae, there is a general focus of ethers. It's quite evident even with a minor extension of vision. This is the healing agency, not the sparks. The ether rushes to suppress the electromagnetic activity. But why go through all that trouble when a simple orgone blanket does a much more efficient, controllable job without that infernal juice? Keep that 115-volt juice away from the organism. My own experience with orgone accumulators leaves me with no other choice but to regard the MWO as superfluous. A good rule for any experimenter. If it gets simpler, you are on the right track.